Thank you for the kind introduction. Yes, I think we'll start with the poll. If we can have the questions up on the screen right now. Yep. So I won't read out the question, but I'll introduce our panelists in the meantime, and if you guys can vote, that would be great. So. First of all, super exciting to have representatives from Hong Kong, Singapore, the US, Israel, Japan. This is a fantastic panel. I'm very excited about this. Next to me is Carrie Chan, CEO and co-founder of Avant Meats. From Hong Kong. It's the first cultivated meat company from Hong Kong. And before this, Carrie Chan was an experienced business executive. Next to her is Ling, the CTO and co-founder of Shiok Meats, the first cultivated meat company from Singapore. And she is a stem cell biologist with over 10 years of experience. And we have Eric Schultz, VP of Product and Regulation from Memphis Meats from the US, and he's a molecular biologist, genetic engineer, and a former federal biotechnology regulator. Then we have Didier Toubia, and he's the CEO and co-founder of Aleph Farms from Israel. He's a food engineer and biologist. And finally, we have Yuki Hanyu, the CEO of Integriculture from Japan. He also founded the Soju Meat Project, which is the world's first citizen science community for DIY open source cultivated meat. So I will jump right into the question here. At the end, we'll leave about 10 minutes for audience Q&A. So during the session, do think about what questions you have for our amazing panelists, and we will have 10 minutes to discuss that. Okay, so to begin this discussion, I want to set the scene for our discussion. So I'd like the audience to have a snapshot of where each of your companies is actually at. So I'll fire this question to each of you. And please respond in one sentence. What will be your first product? And when do you expect that it is ready to go to market? So regulatory or other issues aside, right? Just production timeline. When do you expect it can go to market? Carrie?
One sentence. We are producing swim bladder. In Chinese is fish maw product as a pilot product. Estimated timeline 2022.
Hi everyone, I'm Carrie from Shiok Meats. Thank you for inviting me here. Our first product will be Shiok Shrimp. It's a minced product. We're launching in 1 to 2 high-end restaurants. The timeline expected is early 2021.
So our first products will be delicious, familiar favorites, and we are laser focused on completing our scale production system and be on market in 2021 or sooner.
Our first product will be beef meat. We're working on the whole muscle beef piece, meaning piece of meat, and our expected timeline is the end of 2022.
We are launching our first product, which is not food, which is actually skincare product that I'm already testing on my arms. That's going to be next year, and for the food product, 2021, cell-based foie gras in limited restaurants, and retail launch in 2023.
Extremely exciting. So we're hearing 2020, 2021, 22. I still remember like about a year ago when we have these kind of panels, right? We're talking about a much longer timeline, or nobody's willing to like put their hands up and say like next year is actually gonna be it. So it's really, really exciting to see that things has developed a lot. And we're also seeing a variety of products, a variety of species that's covered in this panel. So I will ask the two companies that've been around for a bit longer, Memphis Meats and Aleph Farms. I still remember when GFI first started, which is like 3-4 years ago, there were 4 cultivated meat companies in the whole world. And now I think there are just over 30. So in the past 3-4 years. So witnessing that change, like that landscape growing like that, I want to know what changes have you seen in terms of any shift in focus? So both in your own companies and what you see in others. For instance, the focus on technological breakthrough versus product development for market fit. So we're talking about like, for instance, for Asian consumers, right? And are there specific topics that are starting to gain your attention, like food safety, nutrition profile?
Yeah, first, there are a relatively large number of companies today, but I assume that most of the companies do not necessarily work on the same products or have the same approach. Some are working more on the ingredient aspect or full product. Some are working on different species. Some on scaffolding, not scaffolding. So I don't see the space as crowded, to be honest, despite the increase in the number of companies. I assume that no one here is doing the same product or directly competing one with the other. And that's a very small number of companies as compared to plant-based meat, for instance. We probably have hundreds of plant-based meat companies with much less differentiation between them. So we're still an early stage industry. We do see a lot of teams starting companies, not always well equipped with a scientific and technological background. So that's also something we have to take into account. I think that the team here is, again, probably a good choice of teams, younger and older companies with a good, well-equipped to approach the market. From my experience in the last, let's say, 6 to 12 months, and being interacting with the industry, I do feel that the cultured meat industry is coming to some kind of maturity in terms of better understanding what the product will be, what the regulatory framework will look like, since the first agreement in the US, and Eric can elaborate on that. What the go-to-market would be. We do see a lot of large investors and institutional big investors who were learning the space for the last couple of years, pulling the trigger and being ready to make first steps in the space, which will definitely be very important for achieving the aggressive goals we've shared with our timelines. And last point maybe regarding the evolving environment. We've heard a lot during that conference here about urban or vertical farming. What we do at our companies is indoor animal farming. We do vertical farming for animals, using the same seeds, which are the cells, ending up with the same end product, but with a growing process which is controlled under the strict conditions of the exact amount of nutrients and water needed, in a clean process, and no need for pesticide for vertical farming, no need for antibiotics in our process. And I expect that the development of that new way to grow fruits and vegetables will also be a tailwind for cultured meat as the animal version of urban farming.
I'll be brief, is that as a former regulator and policymaker for the FDA, the most exciting thing that's happened is that safety is first and foremost. That regardless of what position you are, whether you are from the conventional meat industry or the cell-based industry, you view safety as an essential part of this process. And the other thing that I think that's been really interesting as this has evolved, I agree, we have, this industry's been forced to mature itself very quickly, which is a good thing. Is this notion that we're moving away from the fact that we're producing novel foods. The meat we're producing isn't novel, it's incredibly familiar. The production process is novel. So for the first time in about 10,000 years, we've invented new ways to produce a very familiar product. So moving away from the notion of producing novel foods and using novel production methods to produce foods we're very familiar with, in this case, meat, poultry, and seafood.
Yeah, interestingly, the poll result that we're getting is that people are most concerned about food safety, 44% of them. Does this surprise anyone here, that price, actually only 8% of people are very concerned about this?
I actually saw that thing change. It was taste to begin with, and then when we start talking about regulation, it becomes safety. I don't know. But I'm not too surprised because as a consumer myself, at the end one day, I care about what I eat, whether it is like safe to eat, whether it have long-term effect on my health, and I think it's a very genuine concern. And as a company that is producing and developing the product, we also very careful about what we produce actually.
Yeah, sort of same impression here, because when we were asked questions, people ask, the first question they ask is normally taste, and then next, is it safe to eat, because they don't know much about the subject yet.
I see. Yeah, actually 2 days ago we had a regulatory meeting which definitely this came out. The fact that when we talk about novel food, actually cultivated meat is not novel. The product is not novel, it's just the process that is. So it is quite different when we talk about this, and lumping it together with other novel foods might not be the most effective way to look at this. I think we still have another question for polling, right? Let's pull that up now. Okay, this is the moment of truth. Basically, you have to, yeah, 8% of people say that they care about price, but let's see what we come out with this poll. So I'll get on to the next question, and this is, I'm gonna ask Aleph Farms this as well, because Didier has been educating me that Israel is part of Asia. So for the Asia companies here, being companies based in Asia, how have your respective locations, so Hong Kong, Singapore, Israel, and Japan, framed your business plan or your product development plans? And can you share especially the thinking behind how you decide what is the right species and what is the right product to enter the market with? Should we go with Yuki first?
Okay, so in general, our thinking is that we won't be one company developing one consumer product is not the best way to do things. We are developing is more like a general purpose large-scale cell culture system that can work on any types of cells, like fish or shrimp, or could be for like land animals or like avian species, or even human for medical applications. And what we're thinking is that meat is so part of the culinary culture, and to actually achieve that culinary culture, we need to have like, say, literally more than 1 million people taking part into it. So they will be like local restaurants, farmers, or even normal people. So what we are focusing on is providing them the ability to culture meat, so including like in your kitchen.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So for your own company, Integriculture, is there a specific cell line that, at least in the beginning, you're focusing on? Is there a focus on, let's say, seafood versus pork or beef?
So right now we are starting with like skincare products that's actually based on chicken cells, and the next one will be foie gras, and at the same time we are also like testing on all sorts of different species.
Thank you.
Yeah, first, when we talk about Asia, we usually think about Central or Eastern Asia. There's a big part of Asia which is Western Asia, including the Middle East and the Gulf countries. And I will talk more about Eastern Asia, but just one sentence here. I think that the food security aspect of Aleph Farms as a company in that space of the Middle East and cultured meat in general is very interesting to the Gulf and Middle East countries, where you cannot farm animals easily, especially beef or cattle. And countries like Saudi Arabia or others are investing billions of dollars to develop ways to grow more food locally, like Singapore, but 100 times. So I think we shouldn't overlook that part of the world for cultured meat. From my standpoint, Asia is for us one of the two big strategic markets together with the US. We do understand that the products in Asia might be slightly different. We do whole muscle meat, which we believe for Asia is a good fit. We do believe that beef, which is on the rise in Asia, although not the most consume meat is a good way to start. I think we should start with some kind of specialty or higher end products, which is also what my colleagues here are doing, and then go probably down to more consumer mass market products. And one consideration in Asia in terms of the strategy, I believe that the sustainability strategy in Asia might include maybe more of a social sustainability than in the US or in Europe. I understand that there are 400 million people in Asia living from farming activities. And when we talk about Asia, we have to take those people into consideration as well and to see how we can integrate the ecosystem and not necessarily replace traditional agriculture here. The focus should be really on an alternative to industrial agriculture, large-scale intensive agricultural facilities, and not traditional agriculture.
Okay, for Shiok Meats, we focus on crustaceans. It's not a very popular one in the rest of the world so far. We're the only ones solely focused on crustaceans. Why we picked this is because we're based in Asia and we wanted to begin our journey or mostly be part of Asia. And Asians eat a lot of seafood, and when you go for seafood dishes, whether in a Thai restaurant, Vietnamese restaurant, the most common product that is used is actually shrimp. And how we produce it now, obviously there's a lot of improvements in aquaculture, but we wanted to also provide another way we can do it with cultivated meats. Shrimp is very related to, is basically looks like a smaller version of lobster, which is one of the highest priced seafood out there. When you eat surf and turf, it's beef and lobsters. So for us, we wanted to choose a family of animals that is unique to Asia and also has a good price point to work with.
For Avant meats, when we think about the consideration of cultivated meat for China market that we focus on, we are designing food for people to eat and not feeding robot. So we care a lot about the human aspect of that, and we think the culinary and food culture in Asia is very different from the West, and it actually offers a very interesting entry point for us. We choose a very delicacy and tonic food that is only considered food in Asia, but probably unheard of in the West. So that is one cultural aspect. The other, we work on fish, fish fillet, and every part of fish that is of value. Is because unlike animal on land, that we can actually produce more by having more animal farm, pig farm, and cow farm. And for fish, we're actually getting half of the fish from the sea. The overfishing is something that we cannot undo the effect of. So we like to also address the sustainability of the ocean question. And last but not least, because of the commercial strategy, we try to take a very pragmatic approach by driving down the initial cost, working on a single cell type product, and also commanding a very high selling price as a selling price eventually. So, and we can actually go to market earlier and generating revenue earlier to shorten the R&D period.
I want to actually ask a follow-up question on this because I think it's a very interesting example to show how different the Asian market is, how different the eating culture is, right? So, show of hands, you don't need to use this thing. Who knows what fish maw is? Okay, maybe you should explain what fish maw is and like the price point, which part of the fish it is, and the price point compared to fish meat.
Very quick explanation is a swim bladder of a certain species of fish, approximately 20-ish species. Not all the fish is considered having the valuable part, and they are dehydrated. And then when we consume that, it needs to be rehydrated over 12 to 24 hours, and also remove the fishy smell, adding a lot of like ginger and other spice to remove that, and also to cook. It's a very lengthy, it's a very culinary delicacy product. And the price point is actually very high. The most expensive one is the fish species called bahaba. It is actually endangered now. We cannot find them around in China Sea, and it is illegal to trade that. The fish species that we work with, actually the second most sought after is croaker. So the selling point is about $800-ish US per kg in the conventional form.
So in layman terms, I'm a woman, so I can explain this. We eat that for the collagen. It's purely for like functional beauty, skincare purpose, right? It's a very functional food, and it's a very expensive functional food. Yeah, so that's Asia for you. There are a lot of these like really specific food that nobody else would treat it as food, and that's probably the opportunities that we need to discover. So going on to the next question, let's talk a bit about regulation. Is Eric getting excited now? So when choosing your target market, how much is regulatory readiness a factor of your consideration? And just sort of in general, how are you thinking about regulatory issues at this point? And this is to all of you.
I mean, I'll start with it. It is superlative. It is arguably the most important point. It doesn't matter how great your tech is. It doesn't matter how wonderful your products are. If you can't legally sell it, what's the point? So I would say that the graveyard of innovation is littered at those who chose to ignore that they were a regulated system. And I'm an advocate for regulation, effective regulation in general. So I think it's incredibly important that we all have been working together with our respective companies and respective areas and regions of the world to ensure that a fair and effective regulatory framework is set up to evaluate our products. But I mean, everyone has their own specific feelings, I'm sure.
I can add a little bit. I mean, we were very happy that Singapore is very active in engaging local, which is not many, but a lot of the overseas companies as well. The forum this week on Tuesday was a huge benefit for all of us to get to engage to them. Personally, in Shiok Meets, even when we were just starting last year, before we raised any funding, SFA, the team has been willingly meeting with us, giving us guidance as they're thinking about how to set up the framework, and we share with them how we're building the process, and we're looking into building the dossier together, get all the, food safety concerns, what do we need to provide for certifications, and we really appreciate that here. For us, I mean, we're based here, we're very lucky that we have a very open regulatory board who wants to work with us, and also that food safety is valued in Singapore. Other countries trust us as well, so we thought that this is a great place for us to begin here.
Yeah, I think food regulation is one of those topics that things may be different a lot from countries to countries. And in case of Japan, technically speaking, cell-based food products is already legal, although there are some conditions like not adding any external growth factors or stuff like that. So most of the argument right now is more toward consumer acceptance and consumer reaction, so that some consumer fear happens, and then the government has to step in to make some new rules.
In our views, we see the regulator as a partner, definitely in building the consumer acceptance and the trust. We believe that one of the big concerns which some consumers might have is about the safety. Although, as Eric mentioned, we don't necessarily believe that should be considered as a different product than meat. And having the regulator approving the product, going through the entire process of checking every bit and byte of the inputs process and confirming that our product is safe is for us a very important step in building the trust with the consumer and creating consumer acceptance. We do see a lot of proactive regulatory agencies interested in pushing forward this type of production methods. One concerns of us, for instance, with regulation is on the labeling side. And here, many times, a lot of regulatory agencies do not necessarily make the difference between plant-based meat, which is a replacement of meat with plants, which are processed to look, feel, taste like meat, and cell-based meat, which is meat, but produced with an improved process. And that is one of the topics we need to clarify with many agencies. In Europe, for instance, they don't make the difference. They want to call cultured meat and plant-based meat the same thing. In the US, there was the Cattlemen Association, and a lot of bills on the state level don't make the difference. Here there is a lot of education, I think, to do to make sure that we explain the difference. I know that in the US, some people would regard plant-based meat substitute as meat, and we have maybe some difference with the GFI in terms of our views regarding that. We believe it should be labeled differently, and yeah.
Can I add to that? The idea of partnering with federal regulators. SFA has been wonderful. The US FDA and USDA have working on this on the United States side. It's really important to treat regulators as a part of this process and as human beings, frankly. And the other aspect is too, I'll highlight as well, as on the plant-based side. The FDA has had a long-standing policy and regulatory pathway to approve plant-based products for many years. So that pathway's existed for plant-based products because they are not regulated as meat in the US. In this case, it is a little bit different as we're working through that because we are meat made in a different way.
And the question is about the location of launching related to regulation availability. I think just like any other innovation, interestingly, different jurisdictions and countries want to be very innovative, but it seems that everyone is waiting for some other people to be the first one to approve that. For us, I think just like any other thing, everything is very internationalized and globalized. So I also see the dynamic developing, like the meeting before this conference. I really appreciate the Singapore government actually taking a lot of proactive to bring together different jurisdictions to share the background about how they're going to regulate this novel food. And I see that there are actually quite a lot of overlapping in different jurisdictions because honestly, the background of science is actually the same. It's just there are variations between jurisdictions, but basically all we're talking about is about the health and also risk assessment and management. So for us, we also see very internationally. So we are following very closely US and Singapore. Wherever that is the first to have established a case, I think it is where we will try to get the approval first because a lot of this major jurisdiction, the approval can also be used to be importing food to our destination location as well.
Yeah, I'm very glad you brought this up because the food system is truly global, and especially for companies where you're based in sort of relatively smaller markets, you're almost shopping for regulators, right? Because you don't need to be limited to your own jurisdiction. You can shop around and see where it's easier, the barrier is lower, and you go there first, and at least wherever there's a clear pathway, get the first approval. And then the next thing that would be really important would be the harmonization, which is which then basically extend that impact of the first approval. Do we still have 10 minutes? Yes, okay. So I'm also seeing the poll result from the second question. So 8% of the people say that they care about price, and when we look at this, 49% said that yes, they will eat cultivated meat, but only if it is of price parity with conventional meat. So that kind of leads me to my next question. We've all heard about the challenges of reduction of production costs and scaling up. Beyond that, or you can say that that is exactly the thing that is concerning you right now, but is there other bottleneck that is slowing this sector down? In particular, I want to ask, do we need open access research as in pre-competitive research that is open to everyone? And I guess I'll ask Yuki this question first because that seems to be why you set up Shoujin Meat Project, right?
So you mean like other bottlenecks to like commercialization other than like scaling up or consumer acceptance?
Yeah, I mean, do you think that open access research is going to solve one of the bottlenecks?
Well, what I think is that for things like food safety and the science of meat, those things are one of those things that open access research would help. But ultimately, what needs to be done is that I would say thousands or even millions of people basically growing the culinary culture around cell-based meat. And those things would probably happen outside academic journals. It will more happen on like TV variety shows and stuff like that. And ultimately, we have to get there. And the pathway to there is, well, first we start with academic things, but sooner or later, we will probably move on to more popular ones, like popular as in like people-based.
What is your experience with the project so far? It's been running for a few years. What's the result that you've been seeing?
Yeah, so people first come to like Soju Meat project now, the DIY cell-based thing, out of like curiosity, and some of the like common reasons in Japan tends to be because I've seen that in anime or manga, and then like people actually do the cell culture experiment, and then as soon as they start touching not even like cell-based meat, the actual meat, but even the culture medium that they can formulate from sports drinks, then everything becomes very real, and that's where like discussions, I would say discussions not on academic level necessarily, but on the school and university level discussions start, and we are sort of like slowly but steadily, and probably going to accelerate soon with these like grassroots discussions on cell-based meat on, say, like Twitter or any other social networks.
We've talked about sort of perception, right? Like this not being very novel, it's just a process that is novel. Was it your experience that this sort of normalized because you include the public, the grassroots, they're actually making it with their own hands? Does this normalize what cultivated meat is for the public?
Yes, I would say it has been like very effective in doing that, and normal people actually includes farmers as well. And now the farmers are talking about licensing the cells from the cow they've raised, and that basically sort of includes farmers into the whole cellular agriculture discussions. And and that sort of helped avoiding situations where traditional farmers are resisting cellular agriculture.
Yep. Any other bottleneck that anyone wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean, Yuki, you said it up front, and I agree with you. Demonstrating scale, and I've heard this throughout this conference, is incredibly important. We agree. You have to demonstrate that the technology can scale to feed the extra billions of people that will exist in the next 50 years. And meat demand is set to double in the next 50 years as well. USDA Secretary Sonny Perdue recently said that in the next 50 years, we'll have to produce as much food as we have in all of human history up to this point. To put that in perspective, we need as many options as we possibly can. This is one of them, and we're all working diligently to do so. I think, for example, cost, I think, is going to become a non-issue for many of us soon. There are many meats on menus right now that you would buy that are much more expensive than our products. Cost is not the issue, it's demonstrating scale. The other thing that I think is unique that I'll add, and then I'll pass along, is when Memphis Meats was started, we were the very first company ever to fully commercialize this, and we even predate GFI. And this entire field has stemmed out of commercial industry. So the academic research normally bleeds out into commercial industry, and then that bleeds out into industry. In this case, the cell-based meat industry has done most of the research that would have been done by academia, and then academia has been spinning that out. So we're doing it a bit in reverse. So having more academics doing research to sort of corroborate or certify some of our claims is also very welcome at this point.
To answer the question about the bottleneck, right? I think I will supplement, in addition to the technologies, about the scaling up. It's not just about the cost of the production, but the capex, because we need to produce a very large volume of the cell and biomass for the product. And if you start calculating the very small margin at the beginning of the product, and then you will start calculating for investors' perspective, start calculating the time for the return. And then that give a extra hurdle or challenges for the decision to make investment, which we very much understand. So that's why we are actually very appreciative of like the meeting yesterday night, Temasek and Rabobank and PwC come together and really encourage more brave money and a bit more patience money into this, because at the beginning it's going to be pretty difficult investment decision to make, but the return will be quite massive one after we are beyond the initial critical hurdle in terms of the capex and initial investment. This is I'm trying to supplement on the production cost side.
Just a little bit to add. I mean, related to scale up, it's hard for startups and individual companies and us to work on everything ourselves. So a lot of us has been going out, speaking to governments, and I mean the traditional pharmaceutical companies and engineering companies who make bioreactors to cater to, instead of the small volumes they used to work with, now we're thinking it's so much bigger to supply for food. And we need those industries to kind of move along with us. Otherwise, we'll have to do all the work ourselves. And it's great to see so many big corporates around here, especially the food ingredient companies, food safety companies, being interested in this area to work together with us. And I think it'll move a lot faster when we all try to make this possible in the shortest period of time. And I also really like how at the SFA forum where they were talking about in terms of regulations again, where different countries can come together and do the process together. So instead of me applying in Singapore and only being approved in Singapore, we could have something with Australia and US, and it could happen at the same time. So we don't have to repeat the same process again. Yeah.
I think Carrie has given an extremely awesome conclusion of this panel, so I won't do it again. I'll open it up to questions from the audience. Does anyone have any question? Just raise your hands and I think the mic will come to you. Is here no? Okay. If that's not a hand, right? Okay. If there's no other questions, I think maybe we'll wrap up with one question. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but I'm personally super excited to have been privileged as well to have been sort of by your side on this journey and seeing how fast things has been happening and the collaboration that's been happening, which is extremely heartwarming, actually. In the next year, what do you need most? Let's make an ask to a lot of these stakeholders here.
We are currently doing fundraising. We have completed our deliverable for the last round prototype, completed that in October. So we are actually going for fundraising for the next round. So very interested to speak with people interested in looking at this and understanding what we do.
I guess similar to Avant Meats, we are also looking to raise our Series A, a part of it, because we want to establish our pilot plant in Singapore and get the process going. Yeah.
Scaled production and hopefully high-fiving the FDA and USDA.
On our side, we start working closely with the chefs globally. We're working with the chef Michelin starred in Italy. We start working with the chefs in the US, and we're interested to develop the culinary collaboration with chefs in Asia as well. So we have already initiated a few discussions. We'd be glad to continue that and to expand the network of within the culinary network.
So for us, that will be enthusiastic people and some bioreactors which can range from biopharma grades to DIY made out of Coca-Cola bottles.
Awesome. Personally, I think I hope next year, same place, Rethink conference. At lunchtime, we'll be having cultivated meat. That's what I hope for. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, all the panelists. Thank you.